They laughed when she was auctioned for pennies. The rancher raised his hand, last Montana Territory, 1872. The frontier town of Silver Creek clung to the edge of wilderness like a stubborn burr on a wolf's coat. Dust from the main street swirled in golden eddies as Isaac Buchanan watched the crowd gather for the county auction. At 25, he already carried the weight of his 5,000 acres like an invisible yoke across his broad shoulders, the calluses on his palms testament to 3 years of solitary ranching since his father's passing. "Another fine day to watch fools overpay for broken plows," he muttered, adjusting his weathered Stetson lower over deep blue eyes. The townsfolk called him the young baron behind his back, wealthy in land but poor in companionship, a man who had walled himself off from Silver Creek's attempts at sociability. Isaac believed a simple truth: the frontier demanded solitude. Connection meant vulnerability, and vulnerability got men killed out here. He'd watched his father's heart fail after his mother's fever took her. He'd buried them both on the ridge overlooking the ranch. Love was a luxury the West didn't permit, not when nature and outlaws waited to exploit any weakness. What Isaac wanted was simple: expand his cattle operation, perhaps hire another hand for the upcoming drive. What he needed, though he would have sooner shot a man than admit it, was someone to share the crushing isolation of Montana winters, someone to fill the hollow spaces of the ranch house that echoed with silence each night. He leaned against the hitching post outside the auction house, watching the crowd with detached amusement. Mayor Willard, red-faced and important, called the gathering to order. "Folks, before we start with the farm equipment, we have an unusual item. The stage brought in a woman yesterday, penniless, claiming to be a mail-order bride. But her intended isn't in these parts anymore. Moved on to Oregon Territory last month." Isaac's attention sharpened despite himself. The crowd parted, revealing a young woman standing beside the auction block. Her chin was raised despite the humiliation coloring her cheeks. She wore a travel-worn blue dress, dusty from the journey but of decent quality. Her honey-blonde hair was pinned neatly beneath a modest hat, though several strands had escaped to frame a face that, despite its current distress, possessed a quiet beauty that struck Isaac with unexpected force. "Miss Tabitha Fairchild here needs passage back east or employment to sustain herself," the mayor continued. 22 years old, educated, claims to cook and keep house. "Rather than let her become a burden on our town, I propose we auction her services as a housekeeper for 6 months. Proceeds will establish her here or send her home, whichever she prefers after her term." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "Sounds like a wife without the commitment," someone called. The woman, Tabitha, flinched slightly but held her posture straight, dignity intact despite the indignity. "Starting bid is $5 for 6 months' service," the mayor announced. Isaac watched as several hands shot up. Old widow Jenkins needed help with her boarding house. The saloon owner, always looking for new girls, raised his hand with a grin that turned Isaac's stomach. The blacksmith, recently widowed with 4 children, made a practical bid. $8, called Jenkins. 10, countered the blacksmith. 15, drawled the saloon owner, his eyes traveling over Tabitha in a way that made her hands clench at her sides. Isaac felt something stir within him. Anger, perhaps, or something more complicated. This woman, standing alone against the frontier's harsh reality, facing her fate with quiet strength. 25 cents, Isaac called out, his voice cutting through the noise. The crowd turned, first in confusion, then in amusement. The saloon owner laughed outright. "You bidding pennies for the lady, Buchanan? That how you value female companionship?" Isaac stepped forward, his boot heels striking the wooden sidewalk with deliberate steps. $25, he corrected, his voice level but carrying easily across the suddenly quiet crowd. The silence hung heavy for a moment before the mayor cleared his throat. $25 from Isaac Buchanan. Any other bids? When none came, he nodded. Sold to the rancher for $25. Tabitha's eyes, a striking shade of green, found Isaac's across the crowd. In them, he saw neither gratitude nor relief, but wariness and a flash of something that might have been resolve. As Isaac approached to complete the transaction, he realized he had just invited the very complication he'd spent years avoiding into his carefully ordered life. Yet something about Tabitha Fairchild suggested she might be more than a complication. She might be a reckoning. "I won't be your mistress," Tabitha said the moment they were out of earshot of the crowd, walking toward his wagon. Her voice was cultured, Eastern, but with a steel beneath the refinement. Isaac stopped short, his expression shifting from surprise to affront. I purchased your services as a housekeeper, Miss Fairchild. Nothing more. Tabitha studied him, taking in the lean, muscular build beneath the practical ranch clothes, the handsome face weathered by sun and wind but still youthful at its core, the eyes that revealed intelligence behind their guardedness. Then why? She asked. Why outbid them? Isaac turned away, securing his purchase receipt in his vest pocket. The saloon owner would have made you a sporting girl within a week. The blacksmith has 4 wild children and a house full of grief. And Mrs. Jenkins works her help harder than I work my horses. So you rescued me. Her tone made the words less than grateful. I hired a housekeeper, he corrected, helping her into the wagon with an impersonal courtesy. My ranch needs tending. I need meals cooked. It's a business arrangement. As the wagon rattled out of town, Tabitha gazed at the vast landscape unfurling before them. Endless grasslands broken by distant mountains, a sky so wide it seemed impossible. Everything about Montana was bigger than she had imagined when responding to Edward Carlyle's advertisement for a bride. Edward, who had apparently tired of waiting and moved on to Oregon. How far? She asked after a long silence. 2 hours. Buchanan Ranch sits against the foothills. Isaac kept his eyes on the trail. There's a separate cabin where the foreman used to live. It's small but sound. You'll stay there. Tabitha nodded, relief washing through her. A separate cabin meant safety, privacy. I truly can cook, she offered. And I keep a clean house. Good. The conversation died there, both of them looking ahead at the trail, at the uncertain future they had just yoked themselves to through a transaction of $25. The ranch sprawled across the valley, impressive in its scope. A substantial 2-story house of sturdy logs commanded the center, flanked by a large barn, corrals, and outbuildings. Cattle dotted the distant pastures. It was a kingdom of sorts, carved from wilderness through determination and labor. This is all yours. Tabitha couldn't keep the amazement from her voice. My father's work, mostly. Isaac replied as he drove the wagon into the yard. I've expanded the herd since his passing. And you manage this alone? I hire seasonal hands for the drives and roundups. Day to day, it's just me. The loneliness of such an existence struck her suddenly. One man amid all this vastness, all this work. No wonder he needed help, though she suspected the isolation was partly by choice. The foreman's cabin was indeed small but clean, with a brass bed, a table with 2 chairs, a small stove, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. It was more privacy and independence than she'd hoped for when the mayor had announced her auction. I'll expect breakfast at sunrise, Isaac said from the doorway, not entering her space. Dinner at sundown. The rest of the day, the house needs attention. It's been neglected. Tabitha turned from her inspection. I'll need supplies. Soap, brooms, food to cook. He nodded. There's stores in the pantry. We'll ride to town for the rest next week. As he turned to leave, Tabitha called after him. Mr. Buchanan. When he paused, she continued. Thank you. Not for rescuing me, but for treating me with dignity. It's been in short supply since I arrived in Montana. Something flickered across his features. Discomfort, perhaps, at the hint of genuine connection. It's a business arrangement, Miss Fairchild. Nothing more. As she watched him stride back to the main house, Tabitha wondered if he was trying to convince her or himself. The house told Tabitha everything Isaac wouldn't say. 3 years of masculine solitude had left its mark, not in disorder, exactly, but in absence. No cushions softened the sturdy chairs. No curtains framed the windows. The pantry held coffee, flour, beans, and dried meat. Subsistence without pleasure. The master bedroom remained closed, untouched since his mother's passing. Isaac slept in what had once been his boyhood room. Over the first week, Tabitha approached the house as she might a wounded animal, carefully, with respect for its pain. She swept away dust, washed linens gone gray with age, and cooked meals that brought color back to the kitchen. She didn't attempt to transform the house, only to wake it from its grief. Isaac noticed, but said little, though she caught him running his hand along a newly polished table one evening, his expression unreadable. It was during the second week, as a spring storm lashed the valley with unexpected ferocity, that the fragile routine they had established broke open. Tabitha had been cooking dinner when the wind tore a shutter free, sending it crashing against the side of the house. She jumped, dropping a plate that shattered across the kitchen floor. Isaac appeared in the doorway, rain-soaked and urgent. "Storm's worse than I thought. Gather what you need from your cabin. You'll sleep here tonight." "I'll be fine. That cabin sits on the low ground. If the creek rises, you'll be flooded." His tone left no room for argument. "The spare room upstairs is made up." As the evening deepened into night, the storm's fury intensified. Tabitha found herself sitting before the fire in the main room, listening to the wind howl down from the mountains. Isaac entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "The cattle?" she asked, accepting a cup. "Moved to the high pasture yesterday." He settled into the chair opposite hers, the firelight casting shadows across his features. "I've seen worse storms. How long have you been alone out here?" The question slipped out before she could reconsider it. Isaac's gaze remained on the fire. "My mother died 6 years ago. Father 3 years after that. So 3 years, give or take. No siblings. A brother. Died of fever when I was 14. Tabitha absorbed this litany of loss. "I lost my parents in a carriage accident when I was 19. I've been teaching at my aunt's school in Boston since then." What brings a Boston schoolteacher to Montana territory? His question held genuine curiosity. Limited options. Tabitha smiled faintly. "Teaching earns barely enough to survive. When my aunt died last winter, I needed a new path." Edward's letters painted Montana as a place of opportunity, beauty, and marriage as your salvation. There was no judgment in his tone, only understanding. Not salvation. Partnership. She met his eyes directly. "I didn't come west looking for rescue, Mr. Buchanan. I came looking for a life I could help build." Isaac studied her for a long moment. "Call me Isaac," he said finally. "If we're sharing a roof, even temporarily, Mr. Buchanan seems excessive." "Then I'm Tabitha." She offered a small smile. "Though I suspect you'll still prefer Miss Fairchild come morning." Something almost like amusement warmed his expression. "Possibly." They sat in companionable silence as the storm raged outside, the first truce in a battle neither had acknowledged they were fighting. The creek did rise that night, flooding the low ground and leaving Tabitha's cabin inaccessible for 3 days. During that time, a fragile equilibrium developed. They orbited each other cautiously, maintaining distance while sharing space. Isaac rose before dawn and often worked until after dark. Tabitha transformed the house gradually, bringing order without erasing the memory of those who had lived there before. On the 4th morning, as they shared breakfast, Isaac cleared his throat. "I need to ride to the north pasture today. Check fences after the storm." Tabitha nodded, expecting another day alone. "You should come," he continued, surprising her. "See more of the ranch. If you're going to be here 6 months, you should know the lay of the land." The invitation, practical though it was framed, represented the first crack in the wall Isaac had built around his life. Hours later, riding across the vast grasslands on a gentle mare Isaac had saddled for her, Tabitha understood why someone might choose this isolation. The beauty was breathtaking. Rolling hills giving way to distant mountains, wildflowers painting the prairie in splashes of color, hawks circling overhead in a sky that seemed to stretch forever. "It's like riding through a painting," she said as they paused atop a rise. Isaac surveyed his land with the eyes of someone who saw both its beauty and its challenges. "My father used to say God made Montana to show off. He wasn't wrong." Tabitha patted her mare's neck. "How did your family come to settle here?" "My father came west after the war. Confederate officer with nothing left in Virginia." Isaac's voice held no apology or pride, just fact. "He worked cattle drives, saved every penny. Met my mother when he finally bought this land." "Was she from the East as well?" A rare smile touched his lips. "California. Her family came during the gold rush. She used to say she was the only treasure my father ever found out west." Tabitha heard the fondness in his voice. "You take after her or your father?" Mother's eyes, father's stubbornness, according to everyone who knew them. He turned to look at her fully. "What about you? Who are you riding with today, Tabitha Fairchild? Your mother or your father?" The personal question, the first he'd asked that went beyond practical matters, caught her off guard. "My father's determination. My mother's tendency to speak uncomfortable truths." She smiled. Neither served me particularly well in proper Boston society. But out here, she gazed across the wild landscape. Out here, they might be exactly what's needed. Isaac nodded, something like respect warming his usually guarded expression. That fence line won't fix itself, he said, turning his horse. But the wall between them had lowered, if only by inches. By the third week of May, they had settled into a rhythm. Tabitha managed the house and cooking with increasing confidence, occasionally riding out with Isaac when the work allowed. The separate cabin, dried out from the flooding, remained her domain, though she spent her days in the main house. It was during this tentative peace that the past rode into their lives in the form of 3 men arriving as Tabitha hung laundry in the yard. Their horses were trail-worn, their expressions hard beneath the dust of travel. Isaac was checking cattle in the south pasture, leaving Tabitha alone to face the strangers. "Afternoon, ma'am," called the leader, a weathered man with cold eyes. "This the Buchanan spread?" "It is." Tabitha kept her voice steady, though unease prickled along her spine. "Mr. Buchanan is checking the herd. Expected back shortly." The 3 men exchanged glances. "We'll wait, if you don't mind." Old friends of the family. Something in their manner made Tabitha doubt this claim. But frontier hospitality left little room for refusal. "There's coffee in the kitchen," she offered, hoping Isaac would indeed return soon. The men followed her inside, tension radiating from them despite their outward politeness. As Tabitha poured coffee, the leader studied the house with calculating eyes. "You Buchanan's wife?" "Don't recall him being married. I'm the housekeeper." She kept her answer simple, unwilling to explain the circumstances of her presence. The youngest of the 3 smirked. "Pretty fancy housekeeper." Before Tabitha could respond, the door opened, and Isaac entered, his expression darkening instantly at the sight of the visitors. "Mercer," he addressed the leader without greeting. "Didn't expect to see you in Montana. Life's full of surprises, Buchanan." Mercer's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Like finding you've done well for yourself out here." "Real well." The tension between the men was palpable. Tabitha sensed history, dangerous and unresolved. "Miss Fairchild, would you mind checking on the garden?" Isaac's request was clearly meant to remove her from the situation. Reluctantly, Tabitha left the house, but instead of heading to the garden, she positioned herself near an open window, listening. "What do you want, Mercer?" Isaac's voice had hardened. "Just passing through. Thought I'd check on Liam's boy. Your pa and I rode together after the war." "Before or after you robbed that bank in Kansas?" A low chuckle. "You always were direct. Like your father before the fever took his fight. The war changed him, boy. Made him soft. It made him decent. Something you wouldn't understand. What I understand is your father helped us once. We need that same help now." "I'm not my father." "No." Mercer's voice turned cold. "You're not. But you've got his land, his house. Maybe even his sense of hospitality. We need a place to lay low. Just a few days. There's a warrant with your name on it in 3 territories. I want no part of it." "That's not very neighborly, considering." "Considering what?" Isaac's tone was dangerous now. "Considering I know exactly how your father afforded this fine spread. 1 job, Buchanan. That's all it took. 1 job with me and the boys. And suddenly Liam had enough cash to buy all this." Tabitha's breath caught. The implication was clear. Isaac's father had participated in something illegal to purchase the ranch. "Get out." Isaac's voice was deadly quiet. "I'd hate for that pretty housekeeper to learn her employer comes from outlaw stock. Might tarnish your respectable rancher reputation. You've got until sundown to be off my land." The threat in Mercer's laugh sent chills down Tabitha's spine. "We'll go? For now. But we'll be back, Buchanan. Count on it." Tabitha hurried away from the window before the men emerged. Her mind raced with questions. Was Isaac's inheritance built on blood money? What hold did these men have over him? And why did it matter so much to her? Because it did matter. Somewhere between sunrise breakfasts and fence-mending rides, Isaac Buchanan had become more than her employer. His rare smiles had become a reward she unconsciously sought. His stoic pain had become something she wished to heal. The realization unsettled her almost as much as Mercer's veiled threats. When the riders departed, she returned to the house to find Isaac standing at his father's desk, an old lockbox open before him. "Who were they?" she asked quietly. Isaac didn't look up. "Men from my father's past. Men who should have stayed there. They threatened you. They threatened everything." He finally met her eyes, his own troubled. "There are things about this ranch, about my family, you don't know, Tabitha." "Then tell me." He hesitated, conflict evident in his expression. "It's not your burden. I live here too," she replied. "Even if temporarily. If there's danger, I deserve to know." For a long moment, she thought he would refuse. Then his shoulders dropped slightly. "My father fought for the Confederacy. Lost everything. After the war, he fell in with Mercer's gang. Did one job with them, a payroll robbery. No one was hurt. But it was enough money to start over out here. He was an outlaw." Tabitha kept her voice neutral. "For one day of his life, yes. He spent the rest of it trying to build something honest from that beginning." Isaac's jaw tightened. "I found out after he died. Found this box with the confession and enough cash to expand the herd. And now Mercer wants sanctuary. He wants leverage. A base to operate from. Maybe a cut of what he considers family money." Isaac closed the lockbox with finality. "I won't give him any of it." "What will you do?" "Ride to Silver Creek tomorrow. Alert the sheriff." He studied her face. "Does it change how you see the ranch, knowing it began with stolen money?" Tabitha considered the question carefully. "I think most beginnings in this territory are complicated. Men and women running from something, hoping to build something better." She met his gaze steadily. "The question isn't how it began, but what you've done with it since." The tension in Isaac's posture eased slightly. "You're an unexpected woman, Tabitha Fairchild. So I've been told. Usually not as a compliment." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It was meant as one. That night, as Tabitha walked to her cabin, she felt the weight of Isaac's confidence. He had shared his family's darkest secret, not out of necessity, but trust. It was a small bridge across the carefully maintained distance between them, and she found herself treasuring it more than she should. Sheriff Hollister's response to Isaac's warning was prompt. Patrols were increased around Silver Creek and surrounding ranches. For 2 weeks, there was no sign of Mercer's gang, and life at Buchanan Ranch settled back into its rhythm. Yet beneath the routine ran an undercurrent of tension, an awareness of threat that colored every day. The changing dynamic between Isaac and Tabitha was equally subtle but undeniable. He sought her company more frequently, sharing meals rather than simply eating what she prepared. She found herself watching for his return each evening, relief washing through her when he appeared on the horizon. One evening in early June, as twilight settled over the land, they sat on the porch after dinner. The air was warm, filled with the scent of grass and distant rain. "Why did you really come west, Tabitha?" Isaac asked suddenly. "The truth." She considered deflecting, but found herself unwilling to retreat behind half-truths. "Freedom," she admitted. "In Boston, I was the poor relation teaching other people's children. Every aspect of my life was constrained by propriety and poverty." She gazed across the darkening landscape. "Out here, even with all the dangers and hardships, I can breathe. I can become someone of my own making. Even as a mail-order bride? Even then." Edward's letters spoke of partnership, not ownership, of building something together. She smiled wryly. Obviously, his patience ran out. "His loss," Isaac said quietly, the words hanging between them like a confession. Before Tabitha could respond, the distant sound of hoofbeats broke the evening stillness. Isaac was on his feet instantly, hand moving to the rifle kept near the door. "Get inside," he ordered, his voice tense. Tabitha stood but didn't move toward the door. "Who is it?" "Can't tell yet. But no one friendly rides in at dusk without warning." As the riders came into view, Isaac's posture relaxed slightly. "It's Jenkins from the neighboring spread. And some of his hands." 5 riders pulled up in the yard, their expressions grim even in the fading light. Jenkins, a grizzled rancher in his 50s, dismounted with a nod to Isaac. "Buchanan, Mississippi." He acknowledged Tabitha briefly before turning back to Isaac. "You heard about the Carson place?" Isaac shook his head. "Been working the north section all day." "What happened?" "Burned. Every building. Carson and his oldest boy shot when they tried to fight back." Jenkins removed his hat, revealing a deeply lined face. "Wife and younger children hiding in the root cellar survived to tell it. Said it was 3 men. Leader called himself Mercer." Tabitha felt the blood drain from her face. The Carsons had 4 children, the youngest barely 5. Isaac's expression hardened. "When?" "Last night. Sheriffs gathered a posse, but they're a day behind at least." Jenkins glanced between Isaac and Tabitha. Thought you should know. They're hitting isolated homesteads. You might consider moving to town until they're caught. This is my home, Isaac replied flatly. I won't be driven from it. After Jenkins and his men departed, promising to keep watch on the trails between their properties, Isaac turned to Tabitha. Pack your things. I'm taking you to Silver Creek first thing tomorrow. No. The refusal came instantly, surprising them both. This isn't a negotiation, Isaac insisted. Mercer's men won't hesitate to hurt you to get to me. I'm not leaving. Tabitha met his gaze steadily. This is my home too, at least for now. I won't abandon it, or you. Tabitha, would you leave if our positions were reversed? If it was my past threatening the ranch? The question stopped him. That's different. How? Because you're a man and I'm a woman? Because you own this land and I'm just the housekeeper you bought at auction? Her chin lifted in the stubborn gesture he was coming to know well. I made a choice to build a life out here. That means facing the dangers alongside the beauty. Isaac studied her for a long moment, conflict evident in his expression. Finally, he sighed. You'll stay in the main house, and you'll learn to shoot a rifle before sunset tomorrow. Tabitha hadn't expected to win the argument so easily. Agreed. That night, she slept in the spare bedroom of the main house, aware of Isaac moving restlessly through the rooms below, standing guard against threats both real and remembered. Something had shifted between them, a recognition of shared purpose, of mutual stubbornness, of ties that couldn't be easily categorized as employer and employee. In the darkness, Tabitha acknowledged what she had been avoiding for weeks. She was falling in love with Isaac Buchanan, with his quiet strength and hidden wounds, with the life he had carved from wilderness and complicated legacy. It was as inconvenient as it was inevitable, and in the face of present danger, impossible to ignore. The following days brought increasing tension. Isaac taught Tabitha to handle his Winchester repeating rifle, her natural steadiness making her a quick study. They established precautions, locked doors, prearranged signals, a horse always saddled and ready. News trickled in from town. The posse had found Mercer's trail, but lost it in the mountains. Another homestead was raided, the family escaping only because they'd been warned. Mercer's gang was growing, gathering desperate men drawn by promises of easy money from isolated ranches. Through it all, Isaac and Tabitha drew closer, necessity eroding the barriers between them. They spoke of the future cautiously, making plans for summer and fall as if Mercer's threat wasn't hanging over them. Tabitha discovered Isaac's dry humor, hidden beneath his serious exterior. Isaac found himself captivated by Tabitha's quiet determination, her refusal to be intimidated by either frontier hardship or his own emotional walls. It was during a rare moment of peace, as they sat before the fire one evening in late June, that Isaac finally asked the question that had been building between them. Your 6 months will be up in November, he said, eyes on the flames rather than her face. What then? Tabitha's hands stilled in her mending. I haven't decided. Silver Creek needs a schoolteacher. Mayor mentioned it last time we were in town. Are you trying to find me alternative employment, Mr. Buchanan? A smile played at her lips. No. He met her eyes then. I'm trying to find reasons for you to stay in Montana territory. The admission hung between them, more revealing than any declaration. What reasons would convince me, do you think? She asked softly. Isaac set aside the bridle he'd been repairing and moved to sit beside her on the sofa. I've been alone since my parents died. Convinced myself it was better that way. Safer. His voice was low, intent. But these past weeks, having you here, he struggled for words. The ranch feels like home again. Isaac, she began, but he shook his head. Let me finish. I know this isn't what you came west for. You wanted a husband, a partnership, not to keep house for a man haunted by his family's past. He took her hand cautiously. But I find myself hoping you might consider. The crack of a rifle shot shattered the moment. Glass exploded inward as a bullet splintered the window frame. Isaac reacted instantly, pulling Tabitha to the floor. Stay down, he ordered, reaching for his own rifle kept near the hearth. More shots rang out, peppering the front of the house. Through the broken window, Tabitha glimpsed movement in the darkness, shadowy figures approaching from the direction of the barn. Mercer, she whispered. Isaac nodded grimly, checking his rifle. Back door, he said tersely. On my signal, run for the trees behind the house. There's a hunting cabin 2 miles up the creek. Hide there. I'm not leaving you. This isn't a debate. His eyes held hers intently. I need to know you're safe. Before she could protest further, the front door splintered under a heavy blow. Isaac fired toward the sound, buying seconds. Now, he urged, pushing her toward the kitchen. Heart pounding, Tabitha ran, hating herself for each step that took her away from Isaac. The cool night air hit her face as she burst through the back door, the darkness providing momentary cover. Behind her, she heard shouting, another shot. She hesitated at the edge of the trees. Well, look what we found, drawled a voice to her left. One of Mercer's men stepped from the shadows, pistol aimed casually at her chest. Boss will be real pleased. Come on now, nice and quiet. Tabitha's mind raced. The rifle Isaac had taught her to use was inside the house. But in her apron pocket was the small derringer he had insisted she carry at all times. Without hesitation, she reached for it. The outlaw mistook her movement. Don't try running, miss. I'd hate to damage such a pretty. The derringer's report was deafening despite its small size. The man staggered, clutching his shoulder, his own pistol discharging harmlessly into the ground. Tabitha didn't wait to see if he recovered. She ran, plunging into the trees, driven by fear for Isaac more than for herself. The hunting cabin Isaac had mentioned appeared as a dark silhouette against the night sky, nestled against a rocky outcropping. Tabitha paused, torn between seeking its safety and returning to help Isaac. The distant sound of more gunfire decided her. She needed a weapon more substantial than the derringer if she was going to be any use. Inside the cabin, her searching hands found a kerosene lamp and matches. By its light, she located what she sought, a shotgun mounted on pegs above the stone fireplace, shells stored in a nearby box. Her hands trembled as she loaded it, but determination steadied them. Isaac Buchanan had brought her into his life, shared his home and his past, begun to open his heart. She would not hide while Mercer destroyed everything he had built. Isaac fought with the grim calculation of a man protecting what was his. 2 of Mercer's men were down, one dead in the doorway, another wounded and crawling for cover. But Mercer himself and at least 2 others had gained entry to the house. Isaac had retreated to the upper floor, using the narrow staircase as a defensive position. You're only making this harder on yourself, Buchanan. Mercer called from below. We just want what's owed us. My father owed you nothing. Isaac returned, checking his ammunition. 4 shells left, and they had him cornered. Your father was a coward who took his share and ran. Mercer's voice hardened. Now I'm collecting, with interest. Where's that pretty housekeeper of yours? She'd fetch a good price across the border. Rage surged through Isaac at the threat to Tabitha, nearly overwhelming his caution. Only the knowledge that she had escaped kept him from charging down the stairs in blind fury. She's halfway to town by now, he lied. Sheriff will be here by morning. A low laugh. Then we'd better finish our business quickly. Movement at the bottom of the stairs, a flash of clothing, the gleam of a gun barrel. Isaac fired, heard a cry of pain. 3 shells left. He had no illusions about his chances. Outnumbered, cornered, running out of ammunition. But if he could hold out until dawn, there was a chance Jenkins or one of his riders might spot the trouble during their promised patrol. A crash from below. They were searching the house, likely looking for the strongbox his father had left. Let them search. The remaining money was buried beneath the apple tree his mother had planted, not hidden in the house. The irony wasn't lost on Isaac. He had spent years building walls around himself, convinced connection was a weakness. Now, facing death, his only regret was not telling Tabitha the truth of his feelings while he had the chance. A floorboard creaked at the top of the stairs. Isaac swung his rifle toward the sound, finger tensing on the trigger, and found himself aiming at Tabitha, shotgun in hand, eyes wide but determined. What are you doing here? He hissed, lowering his weapon. Saving your stubborn hide, she whispered back, moving to his side. They're ransacking the lower floor. One is watching the stairs. Isaac wanted to be angry at her disobedience, but relief at seeing her alive overwhelmed everything else. How did you get up here? Climbed the oak outside your window. She nodded toward the back of the house. Branch nearly broke, but it held. Despite everything, Isaac felt a surge of admiration. You're the most impossible woman I've ever met. A smile flickered across her face. So you've mentioned. She hefted the shotgun. What's the plan? Before Isaac could answer, heavy footsteps approached the staircase. Buchanan, Mercer called. Last chance. Come down. Tell us where the money is, and we'll leave you breathing." Isaac and Tabitha exchanged glances. In her eyes, he saw not fear but resolve, a partner ready to stand with him against whatever came. Something shifted in his chest, the last wall crumbling, the final resistance giving way to a truth he could no longer deny. "If we get out of this," he whispered, "I'm going to ask you to stay. Not as my housekeeper." Tabitha's eyes widened slightly, then softened. "If we get out of this, I'm going to say yes." The simple exchange, made amid danger and uncertainty, felt more binding than any formal vow. "Cover the landing," Isaac instructed, renewed determination in his voice. "I'll take the stairs. Wait for my signal." As they moved into position, a sudden commotion erupted below. Shouts, the crash of breaking furniture, gunshots. Confused voices called out warnings. "What's happening?" Tabitha whispered. Isaac shook his head, equally puzzled, until a familiar voice boomed through the house. "Buchanan, you alive up there?" "It's Sheriff Hollister." Relief washed through him. "We're here," he called back. "Upper floor armed. Stay put. We've got 3 of them cornered in the parlor." The next minutes passed in a blur of action. The sheriff and 4 deputies had arrived just in time, alerted by the wounded man Tabitha had shot. They'd caught Mercer's gang by surprise, coming in through the kitchen while the outlaws focused on the stairs. By dawn, it was over. Mercer and one of his men were dead, the others in custody. The house bore the scars of the fight: broken windows, bullet-riddled walls, overturned furniture. But it stood, as did its owners. As the sheriff's men loaded the prisoners into a wagon, Hollister approached Isaac and Tabitha, who sat exhausted on the porch steps. "Jenkins rode into town last night. Said he'd heard shooting from this direction." The sheriff shook his head. "Lucky thing we were already saddled up on account of reports Mercer had been spotted nearby." "Lucky indeed," Isaac agreed, his hand finding Tabitha's. Hollister's gaze dropped to their clasped hands, then back to their faces. A knowing smile crossed his weathered features. "Well now, seems more than just the ranch was worth defending." After the sheriff departed, Isaac and Tabitha surveyed the damage in the growing light. The house was battered but salvageable. The danger that had loomed over them for weeks was finally gone. "We should start cleaning up," Tabitha said practically, though exhaustion lined her face. Isaac shook his head. "Later." He turned to face her fully. "There's something more important to attend to first." She raised an eyebrow, a smile playing at her lips despite everything. "More important than a house full of broken glass." "Much more." He took both her hands in his. "I meant what I said upstairs. I want you to stay, Tabitha. Not for 6 months. For good." The words came easier now, in the clear light of morning, with the certainty of feelings tested by fire. "I spent 3 years convinced I was better off alone. Then you arrived and proved me wrong in every possible way." "Is this a proposal, Isaac Buchanan?" Tabitha asked softly. "The most sincere one ever offered in Montana territory." His blue eyes held her steadily. "I love you, Tabitha Fairchild. Will you stay and build this life with me? As my wife, my partner?" Tabitha felt joy rise within her, unexpected and complete. "Yes," she said simply. "Though I warn you, I'll never be an ordinary rancher's wife." Isaac laughed, the sound transforming his face. "I wouldn't want you to be. I fell in love with an extraordinary woman who shoots outlaws and climbs through second-story windows." "And who was auctioned for pennies," she reminded him with a smile. "The best $25 I ever spent." He drew her close, his kiss a promise of the life they would build together. Autumn painted the Montana landscape in gold and crimson as Isaac and Tabitha Buchanan stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching the first snowflakes dance on the October wind. 5 months had passed since the night Mercer's gang attacked. 5 months of rebuilding, healing, and planning for the future. The house behind them had been transformed, not just repaired from the damage, but truly made into a home. Curtains framed windows that had stood bare for years. The parlor, once a shrine to Isaac's parents' memory, now held comfortable furniture arranged for conversation and comfort. Tabitha's books filled shelves Isaac had built with his own hands. "Winter comes early up here," Isaac observed, his arm around his wife's waist. "We should finish bringing in the last of the garden tomorrow." Tabitha nodded, leaning into his embrace. "The root cellar's nearly full already. We'll have plenty." He smiled down at her. "I recall you insisted on having your own garden plot." separate from the ranch's needs. And I recall you laughing at my Eastern notions of agriculture, she countered, until my tomatoes outgrew yours 3-1. Their easy banter was the language of a partnership that had deepened since their hasty wedding in July. A simple ceremony in Silver Creek's small church, attended by the townspeople who had once laughed at Tabitha's auction and now celebrated her as Mrs. Buchanan. Any regrets? Isaac asked suddenly, voicing the question that occasionally still troubled him. About staying? About choosing this life? Tabitha turned in his arms to face him, her green eyes serious. None. I came west looking for partnership and purpose. I found both, just not where I expected. Her hand rested on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. The only thing that would make it more perfect would be— She stopped, a private smile curving her lips. Would be what? Isaac prompted. Would be sharing it with more than just the two of us. Eventually. Her meaning was clear in her eyes, in the slight emphasis on eventually. Isaac's expression softened with wonder and hope. A family? Our family. Someday, Tabitha assured him. When we're ready. He pulled her closer, overwhelmed by the future unfolding before them. I love you, Tabitha Buchanan. And I love you. She reached up to touch his face, marveling at how this man who had once believed himself meant for solitude now embraced connection so completely. Even when you're being stubborn. Especially then, he corrected with a smile. As the snow began to fall more heavily, they turned together toward the warmth of their home, leaving behind the frontier solitude that had once defined Isaac's existence. What lay ahead was a shared life, seasons of planting and harvest, of cattle drives and quiet evenings, of joys and sorrows faced together. In the end, the auction that had begun as Tabitha's humiliation had become her salvation. And Isaac, who had raised his hand last, bidding pennies for a housekeeper, had gained something beyond price, a love strong enough to heal the wounds of the past and brave enough to face whatever the frontier might bring.